Let's begin today's Vanguard news with Bushiroad finally breaking their waifu deck showcase streak by introducing a new Gear Chronicle inspired ride line for Dark States and EZBT11. A Spike Brother main angrily left the room. Astral Bird Gear Chick is your typical D-series starter that's cute and all, but unless it's required by the ride line, will just be replaced with Chrono Dran. Steam Fighter Gumil when ridden over by Steam Fighter Gulkishal lets you pay 1 Soul Blast to draw 2 cards, then return up to 1 normal unit card from your hand to the bottom of your deck. Discard 2 cards instead if you did not return a card with this ability. If you can get an extra card in Soul before riding Gulkishal, choosing to discard 2 copies of Lamina with this card's ability is going to let you draw up to 4 cards that turn, because she was discarded during the ride phase. Funny that a tech in Chronojet back in the day can also be used by this new Gear Chronicle like deck. Steam Fighter Gulkishal when ridden over by a grade 3 Gear Dragon lets you either call or add up to 1 grade 3 or lower unit card from the top 5 cards of your deck. Call this card to rearguard and soul charge 1 card instead if you did not reveal a card with this ability, and while on rearguard during your turn, he gets 5k power if you have a grade 3 or higher Vanguard and either player's rearguards were bound this turn. We can thank Shiranui for making sure that any other stride deck couldn't use any other ride line cards besides the ones they come with. This could have been a nice alternative for smoke gear in Chronojet. Time Spiral Fist Dragon Glauwind Dragon once per turn while on Vanguard lets you bind a card from your soul to return one of your opponent's rearguards to the bottom of their deck. Then this unit gets 5k power if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or higher. And while on Vanguard, you can pay 1 counter blast and binding 2 of your rearguards when it attacks to call up to 2 unit cards in the same column with a total grade equal to the total grades of the cards bound for this card's cost. If I were to describe this card, it would be a weaker version of Time Stamping Dragon. This feels so underwhelming for a grade 3 unit that this honestly doesn't feel like triple rare material. Eternal Overload Colossus is an 18k power main deck grade 4 unit card with triple drive that cannot be rode. While in your hand, you can pay 3 energy and binding this card if you have a grade 3 or higher Glauwind Vanguard to draw 2 cards. And when placed on rearguard by your grade 3 or higher Glauwind Vanguard's ability, it gets all of its abilities based on the total grades of your Dark State cards in your bind zone. If you have 10 or more, it gets a once per turn auto ability that gives itself 20k power when it attacks, but gets bound at the end of that battle and you draw a card. If you have 20 or more, it gets a once per turn auto ability that lets you pay 1 counter blast at the end of the battle it attacked to stand itself. And if you have 30 or more, it gets a continuous ability that gives itself an extra crit. Drawing multiple copies of this card in the early game or just damage checking this card is a death sentence to this deck's main win condition. Even being able to bind it from hand doesn't save the deck unless you run Gear Goat to return it back, which you technically don't want to do if you want to fulfill its really demanding condition. This isn't even taking into account that you need to bind a grade 3 and 1 or 2 grade 2 card rearguards just to call this card with Glawwind's ability. And assuming you do call at least 1 copy of this card to rearguard, it sure as hell will be the prime target of your opponent's removal abilities. Stirring Tree Gear Frog when placed on rearguard from hand lets you put up to 1 normal unit card that isn't a sentinel from your bind zone to the bottom of your deck if you have a grade 3 or higher Glauwind Vanguard. Then soul charge 1 card and it gets 5k power if you returned a grade 3 or higher card with this ability. On one hand, the deck has a way to recycle back Overload Colossus besides using Gear Goat. On the other hand, making this non-place from hand ability in a deck that wants you to call from your deck is just plain dirty. You wouldn't see this kind of restriction in a lyrical Monasteria support. Steam Gunner Baralama, while in your drop zone, lets you pay 3 energy when your card is bound during your main phase to call himself. And while on rearguard or the Guardian Circle, he gets 5k power and shields if you have a Gear Dragon Vanguard. This is a decent instant 18k beat stick when you use Glawwind's first ability. Other than that, this card is going to be bind fodder to call Overload Colossus, so don't expect to keep cycling this card from your drop zone. Finally, Steam Shooter Amutus, while on rearguard during your turn, gets an additional grade and 2k power if either player's rearguards were returned to the deck or bound this turn. and while on rear guard, you can bind herself at the end of the battle she boosted, while you have a Gear Dragon Vanguard with Persona Ride to draw a card. It's hilarious how the devs went out of their way, so Chronogid can't use her second ability. And why the hell couldn't the additional grade be applied even when she's bound? The deck already suffers from turn 5 syndrome. To start functioning properly, the least they could do is make it easier to achieve 20 grades in the bind zone by turn 4. And that concludes this Vanguard news without the bullshit. Special thanks to my Patreon members for continuing to support my content creation. Be sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments if a certain someone is going to say that this is a better innovation than striding.